Talia.
I walked away from him, slowly. I was giving him a chance, and I also knew that I wanted him to stop me. Every step I took felt like a bullet to my chest, and as I got nearer and nearer to the door, I started losing hope. However, I couldn't just give up on that. I halted my footsteps, not bothering to turn around because I was afraid to see the expression on his face. "I'm giving you one last chance," I said, my voice faltering at the near end. "If you don't stop me right now, then everything is over. Consider everything that happened in Amari Coast to be non-existent because you won't be a part of our lives anymore." The room was dead silent, indicating he wasn't following after me. I let out a shaky sigh and felt tears brimming in my eyes. I nodded my head, defeated about the situation. So, this is how it ends? After everything we went through, this is how our love story ends. I took another step forward, getting closer and closer to the door. I didn't have any hope left in my heart when I reached the door. I shakily placed my hand on the handle, slowly turning the knob. "I'm sorry," he said, and I suddenly felt a warm pair of arms circle around my body. I felt tears streaming down my face as he buried his face in my neck. "I'm sorry, my love," he whispered, his voice filled with pain as he embraced me even tighter. I couldn't help it. I turned back around to look at his expression. I let out a sigh of relief when I saw that the cold expression on his face had now been replaced with worry. I hit his chest multiple times. "I hate you! I hate you!" I said as I hit his chest. He nodded his head and took all of the hits. I know. I'm sorry." He never took off his arms around me as he continued apologizing. He fixed my hair, removing the stray pieces away from my face, then wiped my wet cheeks with the pad of his thumbs. I looked up at him, still with tears in my eyes. "Do you know how scared I was?" I asked breathlessly. "When you looked at me like you didn't love me anymore, I thought everything was over." He nodded his head, just listening to everything that I was saying. "Do you really not love me anymore?" No. I love you," he quickly said. "Then why didn't you respond earlier?" I had to, Bambi," he looked down at the ground. "I had to do it." I stopped crying as I looked at his broken face. I wiped the tears in my eyes with the back of my mind and tugged on his wrist. "What do you mean by that?" He sighed and raked his hands through his hair, a frustrated sigh coming from his lips. "My dad found out that I went to Amari Coast because of you. That's why he went out of his way to have his men kidnap me just as I was about to meet you at the Plaza station that day." I nodded my head in understanding. "Are you okay now?" I asked, placing my hands on his bruises and lightly pushing on them. "Does it still hurt?" He delicately smiled as he placed his hands right on top of mine. "They don't hurt anymore, Bambi, especially now that you're here." I smiled because he was now back to normal. He took my hands into his and placed a small kiss on my forehead before continuing his story. "I was stuck in the dungeons for 3 days. He chuckled coldly. "I was kept captive by my own father because I refused his orders. I told him that I wanted to go back to you, and he didn't let me. It's such a fucking shame that he still has so much hold on the Cosa Nostra even if I'm already the current Don. I couldn't do anything about it, and I didn't want to cave in. I honestly thought of just dying right then and there." I let out a small gasp. "But I didn't," he ultimately said. "Because I knew that I couldn't afford to die. I had to come home to Lucille and you." I nodded my head. "But my freedom came with a price. I was able to escape, but I wouldn't be able to go back to my family. Of course, I wasn't just going to listen to my father. I had a plan. But it seems like he already found out about my plan of escaping before I could even execute it. On the day I was about to escape, he placed an ultimatum on your life." I bit my lip and suddenly felt so bad for him. "I was to treat you like you are nothing. Otherwise, he's going to harm the both of you." I could see his hands unconsciously shaking, so I held onto them and placed a kiss on both of his palms. "It's okay. I comforted. I'm here. I'm fine. You are, he said, looking at me as if he couldn't believe that I was standing right in front of him. And I'm so glad that you're here. When I saw you come into the room, I wanted nothing but to run to you and hold you in my arms. However, my fear got the best of me, and I didn't. I acted like I didn't want you anymore. You were just afraid to lose me, I said. He nodded his head. I can't bear you getting hurt just because of me. Without you, I am hurting. So, please, Luciano, tell me everything. I'm always willing to share the pain with you. I know, he said, closing his eyes and leaning his forehead against mine. We stayed silent for a while, just relishing in each other's presence. It's only been a week since we haven't been in each other's presence, but it already feels like a lifetime. I really can't imagine the rest of my life without Luciano by my side.
Talia.
So, what are we going to do now? Daisy asked. The two of them were now back in Luciano's office, and Luciano had already explained everything that had happened over the course of the week. Daisy almost punched him for not telling them sooner, but with Reese's help, we were able to control her. Reese sighed and raked his hand through his hair. I'm lost, honestly. I didn't know that Don Emiliano is still so influential in the Cosa Nostra. It's always been like that, Luciano said. A lot of the older members refused me to take the Don position when I was 18. So, a lot of them still follow my father's orders. It's unfortunate that most of the members of the Mafia had been influenced by my father. Well, the most important thing right now is that we keep Lucille safe, I said, and they all nodded their heads in agreement. We still have some trusted people on our side, Luciano said. Contact them and ask them to go to Amari Coast so they can guard the ferry household, he told Reese. On that, Reese said, pulling out his phone and going to the other room to make a call. You, on the other hand, he pointed at me, will be staying with Reese in the meantime. Daisy nodded her head. Yes. You can stay with the two of us while you're here. Luciano snapped his gaze at her. The two of you? Since when have you two lived together? Her eyes widened in surprise while a smirk appeared on my face. Their secrets just continue unraveling right before my eyes. When you left, she meekly said. Oh, really? He raised his eyebrows. She rolled her eyes. We're not talking about this right now. Reese came into the room, his phone still in his hand. It's already set, Dawn. They're going in a couple of hours. Luciano was still looking at Daisy with teasing eyes, so Reese stopped in his tracks and looked at the three of us in suspicion. What did I miss? Nothing, Daisy quickly said before we could respond. Let's talk about how we can convince Luciano's father to accept Irina and Lucille. I looked at Luciano's hopeless face and reached over my hand to hold on to his. I gave it a tight squeeze, hoping he'd feel that he isn't alone in this situation. My dad's very hard to convince. I'm sure all of us already know that. Reese nodded his head. I've never seen him change his decision even if he's already clearly in the wrong. We lost so much profit 2 years ago because of his decision, but he pushed through and blamed it on our incompetence instead. And wasn't he adamant on making Luciano the Don even at a young age so he could ensure that his legacy would be continued and not be passed on to his brothers and relatives? Daisy added. I let out a heavy sigh. In short, we're fucked, I said. Is there really no other way to change his mind? Well, there's one way, Luciano said. We all perked up and waited for his suggestion. But it's impossible. There was only one person who could make him change his mind. Who? Daisy asked. Renee, he said, a bitter smile on his face. Oh, my voice fell. Right. Renee was only the ever one who had the guts to go against her father. I miss her, Daisy said in a soft voice. Me too, I said. Me too, Luciano added. But I'm sure she's in a better place now, a much more peaceful place. Luciano smiled and nodded his head. She's probably having one hell of a time in heaven. I just wish she could go down for a bit so she could help us with this dilemma. Wait, Reese said, standing up from his seat, the chair making scraping against the ground. It looked like he had an epiphany just now, so we all looked at him with anticipation. There is someone who could change Don Emiliano's mind. Are they still alive? Daisy asked. Very much so. And they're the only one who has the most influence on Don Emiliano's decision. It's someone who has been working close to him for the past decades. Will you quit stalling and just tell us? I snapped, getting impatient. He opened his mouth, and I waited in anticipation. It's Dad. My shoulders slumped after I heard what he had just said. Right. The other person who can convince Don Emiliano is my dad, who just so happens to hate my existence. Will you talk to him, Reese? I asked. You're his son, after all. I'm sure he'll listen to you. He pursed his lips together. We aren't exactly on good terms since I decided to become Luciano's right-hand man. He wanted me to work for Don Emiliano, and I refused, so we haven't spoken ever since. I clicked my tongue and leaned back against my seat. Well, he's definitely not going to listen to me, so we need to find another way. Reese went closer to me and held onto my hand. If there's someone who can convince Dad, it's you, Talia. You're the only one who can change his mind. Are you insane? I asked. He never batted an eyelash whenever I got hurt. Heck, he never even greeted me during my birthdays. What makes you think that he's going to listen to me after all these years? He sighed and looked down at the ground. Ever since you left, he's actually been quite down. He also hasn't been that active in the Mafia, and I believe that your departure is the reason for that. Even if we haven't been on good terms lately, I could tell that he's still sullen about what happened, Talia. Maybe he'd be happy if you showed yourself to him. I bit my lip and looked away from him. I don't know, I muttered under my breath. I'll come with you, he said, further convincing me. I won't leave you alone. Will that really work? I asked him with wide eyes. I don't know, he honestly said. But we're desperate right now, aren't we? There's no harm in trying. Except there is, Daisy said. We don't know what'll happen if your dad decides to confide in Don Emiliano. I'm sure he wouldn't, Reese said. He might not have been the best father, but I'm sure he wouldn't want us dead. I sighed and closed my eyes. Suddenly, all of the happy memories that Luciano and I made with Lucille appeared in my mind, and I no longer had to be convinced. I'll do it, I said. Are you sure? Daisy asked. I nodded my head. I want to do this, for my family. Luciano smiled and placed his hand on my shoulder, ever so gently caressing it. Do you want me to join you? I shook my head. It's okay. I can do this, I said. He proudly nodded his head. I'm one call away. Well, let's go back now so we can take a rest, Reese said. I nodded my head and stood up from the chair. Can you give us a couple of minutes? I just want to say something to Luciano. All right, he said. We'll be outside of the secret entrance. Once Reese and Daisy were out of the room, I turned to Luciano and gave him one last hug. I really missed you. Me too, Bambi. Me too, he said, placing a kiss on my forehead. Are you sure you don't want me to join you tomorrow? I shook my head against his chest. I'm sure. I honestly want to speak with my dad alone. And I also want to tell him all the things that have been pent up inside my heart. I just hope he listens to me this time, just this once. I hope so too, Bambi. We broke away from the hug and looked at each other with so much love. When will I be seeing you again? I asked. Soon, he smiled. We'll get through this, Talia. I nodded my head and stood on my tippy toes to give him a kiss on the lips. I hope we will.
Talia.
I shook my hands in nervousness as we arrived at the driveway of our house. Are you all right? Reese asked. We can still go back if you want to. I shook my head. I just need a moment. I closed my eyes and took in a deep breath. Do they already know that we're coming? He nodded his head. I called him yesterday. I didn't tell him that you'll be coming, but I told him to expect a visitor. I guess that's better than nothing. I chuckled, trying to lighten up the mood. It'll be fine, Talia, he assured. I'm sure he misses you. That's highly unlikely, I told him, but I'll still try my best to convince him to help us. Then shall we go? Yeah, I nodded my head. It's better to get this over with. The two of us left the car, and although I want to deny it, I feel so fucking nervous that I just want to run away from this place. However, thinking that this would help our family immensely, I decided to brave through it all and swallow my nervousness. We entered the house, and there was no one to greet us at the front door. He's probably in his office, Reese said. Ever since you left, he's been locking himself up in his office aside from meals and work. I didn't respond because I found it hard to believe everything he was saying. I was just glad that my other brothers weren't home, otherwise, I really wouldn't know how to react. The two of us went up the stairs to go to my father's office. I could hear his gruff cough from the room, so I knew that he was inside. I felt my side stiffen up as Reese raised his fist to knock on his door. Come in, he said, his voice still the same. Reese slowly opened the door. I'm home, Dad. MMMH. He hummed. I'm surprised you even have it in you to visit. He said. You haven't gone home in months. He awkwardly chuckled. I'm sorry, Dad. I've just been busy with work. I was hidden behind Reese's back, so my dad still hadn't seen me. Well, don't just stand there. Come in. I let out a deep breath as Reese walked inside the room. I trailed behind him quietly, making my presence small. I lifted my head and saw my dad in his chair, reading the morning paper. He still hadn't looked up from the paper, so it gave me some time to observe his appearance. It's only been 4 years since I've last seen him, but he has aged so much within those years. His face seemed duller, and his frown lines became even more prominent. Finally, he lifted his head, and we made eye contact. He froze, and his morning paper dropped down on the table. He looked at me with wide eyes, as if he couldn't believe that it was me who was standing right in front of him. Talia, he said my name in such a gentle tone, one I had never heard before. Dad. Talia, he stood up from his seat, his chair toppling down to the ground. Is that really you? I shyly nodded my head from behind Reese. No matter how much I want to hug him right now, I'm really not in the mood to be scolded. However, I was shocked when I suddenly felt a pair of strong arms wrap around my body. I thought it was Reese, but there was no reason for him to be hugging me so suddenly. Dad? I asked, surprised as he was the one hugging me. Oh, Talia. It really is you. I was so shocked that I didn't have it in me to hug him back. My arms stayed stiffly by my side while Reese looked at me with amusement. I told you so, he mouthed, then he gestured towards the door. I'll wait downstairs, he whispered. My eyes widened in surprise, and I shook my head. However, he was already out of the room. Before I even knew it, only my father and I were left inside the room. After a while, he finally let go of me, but his hands stayed on my shoulder. I can't believe that it's really you. I pursed my lips together and took a step back. It is me, Father, I said in a formal tone, like how I always spoke to him. His face fell a little bit, and I would have felt bad, but I realized we'd never had a good relationship with each other, to begin with. I came here to talk to you about something, I said. He straightened his posture and started walking over to his seat. He must have realized that I wasn't in the mood for a tearful reunion, so he tapped on the chair right in front of him, gesturing for me to come over. Let's talk then, he said, sitting down on his chair. I nodded my head and followed after him. I'm going to cut down to the chase. I need your help, I said. His eyebrows raised in surprise. That is how you're going to greet me after all these years? You disappeared for 4 years, but you're not even going to explain? I don't think the two of us are fit to have that conversation, Dad. We've never talked that much, I chuckled coldly. He looked to the side and cleared his throat. Deep inside, he probably knows that what I said is right. We've never been that close, even if he is my father. Are you all right, at least? He asked in a soft voice. I nodded my head. I am. I'm happy. Okay, he said. That's enough for me. Now tell me why you need my help. I let out a deep breath before telling him the entirety of the story. I made sure to include every detail, even Lucille. I have a granddaughter, he asked. I nodded my head. She's with a trusted person right now. He smiled. I have a granddaughter, he repeated under his breath before looking back at me. Continue. I continued with my story up until the time that Don Emiliano captured Luciano from Amari Coast and gave him an ultimatum. His frown deepened as the story progressed, so I had some hope in my heart that he was indeed going to help me. So, you want me to change Don Emiliano's mind? He asked, a frown still on his face. Yes, I nodded my head. We've come to the conclusion that you're the only person who is capable of having him change his mind. He let out a sigh and leaned back in his seat, appearing to be conflicted. That's not an easy task, Talia. I know, I said. But you've done plenty of more difficult tasks than this. Can you please just talk to him so he can accept Lucille and I? I just want my family to live in peace, Dad. I know, he nodded his head. I acknowledge that. You've struggled with our family since you were young, and I'm sorry for that, he said. I pursed my lips together and looked down at my lap. I never expected my father to apologize, yet here he was. I'm sorry for not treating you like my daughter, he said. I looked up to meet his sincere eyes, and I nodded my head as a sign of acknowledgement. Even if I cannot forgive him now, I hope he knows that I appreciate his apology. Then, will you please help me? I asked in a hopeful tone. He let out a deep breath and leaned his elbows against the table. I'm weighing the consequences, and it really seems like it'll be difficult for me to convince him, Talia. Can you at least try, Dad? It'll be a form of defiance if I question his decision. You know that I've been working with him for more than 30 years. My face hardened. And you know that you've never been a good father to me for 23 years. He was speechless. Just this once, Dad. Just this once. Prove to me that you're my father.